Well, first of all, can I thank Cayman Islanders for their warm welcome and Premier and Governor for making my visit possible. Today I've been at the Joint Marine Unit and just been learning about the work they do to ensure that Cayman Islanders remain safe and secure. And they work, of course, against very difficult odds, but they perform an invaluable service. And I'm very proud of the fact that the UK is supporting that work by using some of our Conflict, Security and Stability Fund to be able to assist in the research that we carried out to find ways in which the service can act in an even more effective and efficient manner. I know that the work they do is essential to the future security and stability of the area. But also, can I just use this opportunity to say how much I've enjoyed my first visit to the Cayman Islands as a minister. I have been before as a tourist, but when I was appointed as Minister for the Overseas Territories this summer, I wanted to be sure that I made a visit to the Overseas Territories as soon as possible, and Cayman Islands is the first of those territories that I've been able to come to attend and to learn from, and it is a learning experience. So in visiting yesterday the sister islands of Little Cayman and Cayman Brac, and today having a visit in Grand Cayman, I've met communities who've explained to me what it's like to live in the islands. I've met also members of the government and the opposition who've talked about the work they do. And I've met people who've advised the government, those who've advised on changes to disability law. Overall, too, I've met the people who will form our next generation of Cayman Islanders, and yesterday afternoon visited a school on Cayman Brac and saw the excellence of the education there. And I feel that with the cooperation of all parts of the Cayman Islands communities, the sister islands, and the UK government, there is a very positive future for our relationship and for the economic prosperity of the Cayman Islands. But thank you very much indeed for being here today. My visit is shortly coming to an end, but this is just my first visit. It's the start of learn more about the Cayman Islands. Premier, can I pass over to you and thank you again for making it possible for me to make as many visits throughout the three islands as possible in a mere 48 hours.
Thank you, Baroness Anelay. Good afternoon to the members of the media here. When the Brexit referendum occurred and the administration changed, the Conservative administration changed, I wrote to our new Overseas Territories Minister, who I had not met at the time, congratulating her on taking up the post and inviting her to come and pay us a visit, either in an official capacity or as a tourist. I had no idea she had already been as a tourist. And I have to say how absolutely amazed and delighted I was when the governor told me a few short weeks later that she'd actually agreed to come. I think, and we've spoken about this, I think it is so important that those who have responsibility for the affairs of the overseas territories do have hands-on knowledge of the territories and the uniqueness of each of them. And so not only will that assist them in making the determinations and decisions that they need to make, but it will also help to dispel many of the myths about what we are and what we do. And as they walk the corridors of power at Westminster, they're able to help to influence the thought processes of those who are ultimately in charge of key decision making in the United Kingdom and indeed more broadly. So I really welcome the visit of the Minister. I'm very grateful to the Governor and the Governor's office for all their hard work in ensuring that the visit happened. We had the minor matter of Hurricane Matthew to be concerned about, and there was a point actually on Saturday evening when I sat quietly on my couch at home and said, she's not going to come. She's not going to come. Because from here, she's leaving for Jamaica. And we had already decided that we wouldn't be able to do the Cayman Brac Little Cayman run. And if she's not going to be able to do the Jamaica run, I said she's not going to come. And it was quite despondent. But things improved very much weather-wise, and I've come to learn that the minister is no shrinking violet at all. And she turned up, and I think we've had a really great program over the course of the last 2 days. It was a matter of great pride for me and the Deputy Premier and the others to be able to show off much that is good and beautiful about the Cayman Islands. And I know the minister was quite struck by the natural beauty of Little Cayman and the great work of CCMI that is going on there, and that at the wondrous beauty of Cayman Brac, particularly the bluff, and to meet so many of the local people and to be able to listen to their experiences about life in these islands. I thought today was very, very good. It's the first opportunity that a UK minister has had to address the Parliament, and I think it was an honour and a privilege for us to be able to do so. Very grateful to the minister for the very clear messages that she delivered, and also grateful to her for her support and encouragement of much of the work that we are doing here, particularly this afternoon with respect to the disabilities bill, which I am shortly to bring to the House, and her great interest in the tremendous work that the committee has done over the course of the past 8-9 years now, since we started the development of a disability policy. I know that human rights issues and the issues relating to the disadvantaged and disabled in the world are matters which are of great import to her. And I was pleased that she was able to see that Cayman is on the leading edge with respect to these matters as far as the overseas territories are concerned. So again, I'm very pleased and very grateful that the minister has come. And I believe this is further evidence of the strong and increasingly strengthening relationship between the Cayman Islands and the United Kingdom. And I look forward to working with the minister in the longer term, but certainly when we attend the Joint Ministerial Council meeting in London next month. Again, I want to thank the minister very much for coming, and Her Excellency the Governor and her office for facilitating the visit.
It's recognition of the importance of the Joint Marine Unit and the work that it's been doing here, and the way in which the Premier and his government has been seeking to reinforce the capability, but an understanding that there are some gaps in service which have been identified by Cayman Islanders themselves and by the government itself. And therefore, the research project, is to look strategically at how best to deploy the resources that exist and to see where there are gaps in those resources and how best they can then be solved. So that funding that I've announced today and explained today is already in position to carry out the research. It's a jointly research between our UK Marine and Coastal Guard Agency and Cayman Islanders. Once that research has been concluded and the results are available for scrutiny, then it will be a matter for decision about how then the government wishes to proceed to develop the services further, and then there will be decisions taken about funding that between the government of the territory and also with the Conflict, Security and Stability Fund in the UK. So it's research, finding results, diagnosing what could be done, decision making about what should be done, and then being able to consider how best to deliver that.
And it might help, James, if I explained how it fits in with the original review, the original Coast Guard Agency review, which was just of the incident. And those were the terms of reference of that review. But you'll be aware that the two members who were appointed by the Premier and leader of the opposition to oversee the review, thought the review should be wider, which is why we put forward a bid to the Foreign Office for this funding. So they do link together.
This is a wider review of general capabilities.
Yeah, throughout the overseas territories, not just Cayman.
Yeah. So the bid was put in by the governor, and what we want to do is to carry out a review of capability for the overseas territories in the Caribbean, plus Bermuda and the Falkland Islands. But the actual proposal came forward because of the experience and expertise here in the Cayman Islands.
So the review is not just for the Cayman Islands?
No, it's each overseas territory, but we've asked to go first. I don't know if we know that we're going first. We will be first.
But if I can just say, it's the overseas territories of the Caribbean, and plus Bermuda, plus Falklands, not further than that.
All right, Andrew.
Could we get a dollar value to that? Oh, sorry, Andrew Harris with Radio Cayman. Could we get a dollar value of the funding that will be allocated?
I can't tell you that today, I'm afraid, because we're in the early stages now of providing the support for it. But clearly, having seen the work here, we're now in a position to be able to take that forward. And as the governor has said, Cayman Islands were in early in the bids to be able to put forward a request for funding, and that is now in the process of being assessed. My understanding is that Cayman Islands project will be the first, and that there will be a scoping exercise, I believe as early as November, to be able to see how to proceed with that.
Mario Gray, Cayman 27. Honorable Baroness, how much is it important that the same-sex referendum is put through, as it, as the relationship between the Cayman Islands and the UK continues? How much of that is predicated upon?
As I said to the Legislative Assembly this morning, this is a matter for Cayman Islanders to decide. The view of the United Kingdom is that we have no plans to impose same-sex marriage legislation on the Cayman Islanders. That's not in our portfolio. It's not what we're about to do. What we appreciate is that changing views takes time. We've been through this process ourselves. When the same-sex marriage bill went through the House of Lords as part of the UK Parliament's work, I was then the government chief whip. It was my responsibility as a business manager to assist the House in passing that bill. And I ensured that for Conservative members of the House of Lords, it was a free vote. There was no whip as to how people should vote. We encourage people to listen to the argument to make up their mind. And I have absolutely every understanding of the sensitivity of these issues. And that's why, although I say very clearly there are international laws, international human rights laws, which we all need to consider and abide by, it can take time for people to change the way that they address certain issues. These are very sensitive issues, and these are issues on which it is for the Cayman Islanders to make their views, not for me to preach or dictate at all.
However, the immigration bill is also dependent upon that, the fact that even though the laws won't change per se, the recognition of these same-sex unions have to be acknowledged into the country. What would you say to that?
I'm aware of recent decisions by an immigration tribunal, and there clearly will have to be consideration about the implications of that, but it wouldn't be right for me to comment upon legislation that is going to go through the Legislative Assembly. I was a guest there this morning, and I considered myself a guest, but somebody who has the greatest interest in the success of the Cayman Islands in the future, because here the Cayman Islands have stable government, good governance, an economy that is working, fiscal responsibility. You're at the leading edge of what overseas territories can achieve, and I want that leading edge to remain in place.
Baroness, can I ask you about Brexit? There's been some... Sorry, I'm Wendy from Cayman Service. There's been some research, especially in particular from Newcastle University. They've been putting out releases suggesting that Brexit is going to have a terrible impact on the overseas territories. You spoke quite promisingly this morning about the opportunities. Perhaps you can give us some comfort about what it is, whether it's going to be good or bad.
I've made it clear while I'm here in the Cayman Islands and when I met representatives from the overseas territories in London that the United Kingdom has a responsibility to involve the overseas territories fully when we're negotiating for our withdrawal from the European Union. The interests of each and every one of the overseas territories must be taken into account. And that formal consultation begins once we have triggered Article 50. But before that, what I've said very clearly is that I see my duty as Minister for the Overseas Territories, a duty to listen and learn about the views of the overseas territories, about how they think that the UK's exit from the European Union will affect them. And we've made it clear as a government that in leaving the European Union, we're not turning our back on Europe and our partners there. What we're doing is making sure we're going to secure our economy, secure our trading base, and to be even more outward looking than we have been in the past. And when I was in the United Nations recently in New York, just about 10 days ago, I gave that same message, that we intend to be more international in our approach than ever before. And we will use our position on the G20 and throughout all international fora to be able to put forward the needs, the views of the overseas territories, because we have such a long relationship with each other. And it is for as much as our benefit as for the overseas territories that we very seriously take into account what impact leaving the EU could have on the overseas territories.
Yeah, just following up on that point, very recently the EU published the first draft of its scorecard system, and in that scorecard system, the Cayman Islands and at least 7 other overseas territories, UK overseas territories, were named. The scorecard is calling for sanctions to be imposed on offshore jurisdictions, and Cayman was named. With the UK now set to leave the EU, your final input on this scorecard system has been tremendously reduced. So what is how will the UK respond to this new scorecard system?
I believe you may be referring to what has been commonly referred to as a blacklist. And I was discussing this last night with representatives who have worked financially in Cayman Islands. And what I said then I can say again today, and that is while we remain a member of the European Union, which is up to 2 years after the triggering of Article 50, which the Prime Minister said will be done by the end of March next year. During that period, we take part in the decision making on how that scorecard is put together. Our view very firmly is that countries, territories should not be on that list if the only reason for the Commission suggesting they should be on it, the only reason is that there is a zero tax rate for corporation taxes, that there's a matter of transparency. Also, that should be there. And of course, the Commission's list has only just been published. It's not definitive. It's now a matter for all the European Union states to discuss that. It's the European Union states who make the decision. The decision has to be by consensus, and therefore we know that since we're not the only state that believes it's essential to rely not just on the existence of tax rates, whatever they are, but on transparency, we know we have support in the view that the Commission's published suggestions are not going to be the final ones.
Ralph Lewis, Cayman Times. I get a sense from your comments that you're quite pleased with what you've seen here. You mentioned the word leading edge, and would you say that the Cayman Islands is an example for the other territories to follow? And secondly, can you comment on your relationship with the existing government?
My relationship with the existing government has been very warm. In 48 hours, I've learned a great deal about the Cayman Islands, but particularly I've had reinforcement of what I knew before I came here, and that is that it's a place of good governance. It has a strong reputation for that. In the build-up in the UK for the anti-corruption summit, which was hosted by David Cameron in May, I knew that the Cayman Islands were going to be presented as being a success story in the work they do in the financial services here to counteract against those who try to use financial services instruments for illegal or tax avoidance reasons. And that was a good news story for the Cayman Islands. I think that the important thing now for me to do as a minister is to be able to go back and say what I've seen, say what I've learned, and ensure that the reputation of the Cayman Islands is enhanced even further. We all know that any country, any territory can always do better. I've seen a government here who has plans to continue the progress that they've already made, and I find that very welcome news indeed.